Hey everybody, it's Charlie from Daily Motor, and I've been glad to spend the last week with the 2024 Hyundai Tucson because oftentimes when a new vehicle comes out, everybody's all hyped up about it for a few months. People get invited to the press launch, and you drive it there, and everyone talks about how great it is. And then all the journalists get them delivered to their houses over the span of the next year, and they talk about how cool it is. But then usually after that first model year or so, once the next hottest thing rolls in, people completely forget about the previous year's cars and move on to the next ones. But as evidenced by some of the cars that have won Daily Motor Car of the Year, including the Volvo S60 this year, we firmly believe that just because a car is hot, new, and fresh doesn't necessarily make it good, and vice versa. If a car's been out for a few years, it actually might be the better time to buy it than when it's brand new. Perfect example is the Mazda CX-50, which we're going to be driving here soon in 2024 version. That car came out for 2023 and the steering was too heavy and the ride was too firm. Now apparently they've fixed those two things for the next model year. So all of that is to say, the Tucson's been out for 2 model years now, and I'm reminded about how good of a car it is. It's probably a much better time to buy a Tucson now than it was back in 2022. So let's take a look at this one. This is actually the first non-hybrid, non-plug-in version of the Tucson we've driven since the launch. So it's actually been over 2 years since I've driven this version of the Tucson, and it's also nice to spend real-world driving time in it. Alyssa and I took it to a concert this past weekend. I did the fuel economy test, tested the Bose sound system again. I ran a lot of errands. Even did a little bit of off-roading with it during the winding road video, which actually surprised me with how competent it was out there. So check the link below if you want to see that. But this vehicle is good in real-world type of situations, and I want to talk about that. First things first, look at this really low load surface. If you're a smaller individual putting heavier things up in and out of their strollers or big bags of dog food or something fairly regularly, you're going to appreciate not only the low load surface, but also the fact that this lip right here is easily traversed by something that you're sliding in and out. And definitely like to see a compact spare tire in here. A lot of vehicles are coming without spare tires. I know the new Prius, a commenter let me know recently that they got a flat and they were kind of screwed because there was no sort of way to fix the tire and no sort of way to replace the tire because there wasn't a spare in the car. Also, this is a really nice feature I've liked with the Tucson in the real world usage, because I did fold the seat down a few times, being able to simply fold the seats from the rear. Now, to be fair, you still have to move the driver's seat up based on where your seating position is in order to get it to fold completely flat, but you can start the process from here, give yourself a little bit of extra room, and then reach up there and finish the job. This is the limited trim, coming in about $39,000, and to be honest, I don't think that's where your value is with the Tucson. I think you're going to be better off getting something like an SEL, maybe throwing in the convenience package and getting a vehicle that costs a good bit less than a lot of the compact crossover competition. But we're going to talk about buying advice on the car here in a minute. I want to go through the rear seat briefly. They did a good job at adding space in the Tucson for this newer generation, and as a 5'10" person, I've got plenty of knee room, plenty of headroom, and plenty of foot room, and you can recline the rear seats dramatically, which is going to not only give you more comfort for adults back here, but also a little bit more room for children's car seats. If you got something like a rear-facing car seat, it's going to help. Flip-down armrest, like to have that. A little bit of cup holder action, 2 USB-A ports there, and vents. Vents are definitely important for people being back here. And even heated seats in this limited model, which, so be it. Panoramic sunroof is nice, though. And the doors open decently wide, not full 90 degrees, but for this class, pretty good. So if you're heaving a rear-facing car seat into there, you're going to get a good amount of ingress and egress room. No need to look at the motor. It's a 2.5-liter naturally aspirated engine. Pretty much what that means here in 2024 is this car feels slow. It's not often that we get a new car on the market here that actually feels slow. But we're going to talk about that, why that's okay, and also what Hyundai could do to improve upon that without changing the engine particularly. And despite paying absurd money for housing here in SoCal, still getting rain. I guess that's what we have to deal with in the winter, is 55 degrees and rain instead of 30 degrees and snow. But this brighter colored interior here in the Tucson, helping brighten up my day as I bring it to life. Engine starts right up. You can see I have the cubes as my instrument cluster here in front of me. If you do want to see a dedicated breakdown on how both of these screens work, check the link below for our infotainment test. Speaking of infotainment, this is one of the last cars on the new car market to only have wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto support in these more upper level trims. And I know it's something that Hyundai is working on remedying, but it is frustrating to have a cord. On the flip side, it is kind of nice that the connection is always so stable and your phone always stays charged up. But if you're someone who's just getting in the car, running down to the school or the grocery store or something like that, it'd be nice to be able to just leave your device in your purse or in your pocket and still have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto coming up. I do have links down below for a few different wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto boxes that you can simply plug into the USB and then pair your phone to that box. I think I've got one that costs about $90 and one that costs almost $200, depending on their functionality and quality. So check the link below if you want to pick one of those up. I had one for our Maverick because the Maverick only had wireless, or only wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as well. It's definitely a nice thing to have if you're going to own one of these vehicles, especially because the car has a wireless device charger. I mean, why have wireless device charging if you can't do wireless phone projection anyway? But you've got built-in navigation that works okay, and of course just Apple CarPlay and Android Auto typically for longer drives. This car has a push-button shifter right here, and I'm okay with it. My only complaint is that I feel that shifters should always have a different type of motion for drive and reverse. I think they should be separate. The fact that you simply push down for both drive and reverse, cognitively, I don't think it's the safest setup. I prefer something, either a shifter where you go one way for drive and the other way for reverse, or a lot of times you see like those rotary knobs, you have a right for drive and a left for reverse. It's not quite as bad as Alyssa's car, the Bolt, where you actually have to put, you pull back on either control for both drive and reverse. There's just no good muscle memory that you can save in your brain for which one's drive and which one's reverse. But fortunately, drive has a little textured button. You press that, and I do appreciate that it takes up very minimal space. You don't have a big shifter blocking your climate controls or anything. And you do have physical climate controls, which I like having as well. Dual zone in this car, so the other night when Alyssa and I were driving to our concert, she was able to have a little bit more AC going on her. I had a little bit more heat. Also, nice big physical controls for heated and ventilated seats and heated steering wheel, and to bring up your parking camera. So if you're driving up to work and you got these spots here, and you're coming into the spot, you want to make sure you don't park like a degenerate. You press this button and you can see your nice 360 camera. Place yourself right in the spot. Or obviously, maybe you're not taking it to work, but maybe you're looking out for children's toys as you're coming into your driveway, or pets or children themselves. Nice to be able to bring up that camera quick and easy. And of course, it comes up automatically when you're in reverse. Driving the Tucson, easy. I actually do not care that this car is slow. That's totally fine. There are other crossovers in this class, maybe like the naturally aspirated CX-5 and the base RAV4, that are very similar in power figures to this car, and they feel the same in the real world. The reason the Tucson doesn't feel as good is because the throttle tuning makes the car inconsistent and jumpy. Oftentimes you'll find yourself pulling out of driveways or getting up to speed after a red light, and the car feels like it's surging forward, or maybe it's not giving you quite enough power, so you have to lean into the accelerator harder, and then the car surges forward. I don't know how much they could do with this motor, but I'd have to think that with some more concerted effort, right there, the car yanked me away. I'm barely pressing the accelerator. So a little more of a concerted effort in smoothing out the driving experience, this could be a smoother driving car, and the power levels wouldn't be as important. Because this car makes plenty of power when you need it. When you need to get up to speed, you can push the accelerator all the way down, and it takes off aggressively. It's just the fact that in normal driving, it's the throttle jumpiness is all over the place. That's what's frustrating to me. This car is equipped with automatic stop-start, so as you come up to a stop, the engine shuts off, and then when you get off the brake, it starts back up. If you want to disable that, it's very easy to do. There's a button right here by the drive mode selector, which you'll probably never use if you own a Tucson, and you press that, and you can disable that engine stop-start. Now, I made a joke that no one's probably going to use the drive modes because I lived with a woman who had a car with sport mode and she never used it. She simply kept the truck in the same mode all the time. But I should eat my words a little bit because now Alyssa owns the Bolt and she does put the car into sport mode fairly regularly in order to get more aggressive throttle response. So I could see if you were frustrated by the throttle response of this car, you could put it up into sport mode and then it at least feels like it's faster just because it's giving the engine more fuel depending on where you're pressing the accelerator pedal. We do have automatic windshield wipers in this car, which I'm kind of surprised by. It's a pretty decent feature here at $39,000. I don't know where in the trim walk you get that, but something you're not getting is a place to put sunglasses. It's a bit disappointing, as they could have built that in quite easily. So should you buy a Tucson? Here's where I stand, because I'm a big fan of the Toyota RAV4. But I gotta admit, this car is doing a lot in feeling nicer, newer, giving you a longer warranty, costing less, probably being easier to acquire than a RAV4 at MSRP, and providing you features that the RAV4 simply doesn't offer. So I do think the Tucson is the right buy for certain people. So let's start off with who it's not right for. If you're somebody who rotates vehicles quickly, if you plan on buying a new vehicle within, say, 3 to 4 years, I would recommend something like a Honda CR-V or a Toyota RAV4 over the Tucson. And this is why. Hyundais statistically don't have great resale value. So if you're somebody who's going to be purchasing the vehicle and then turning around and selling it in a few years, in order to lose the least amount of money in depreciation as possible, you should go with something like a Toyota or a Honda that's going to hold its value a little better. And the thing is, it's not necessarily that Hyundais are significantly less reliable than Toyotas or Hondas or Nissans or anything, but and hopefully I don't get any hot water for saying this, but typically, if a car costs less, it's more likely to be purchased by somebody who has less means and less of a flexible lifestyle in order to maintain their vehicle regularly. Toyotas and Lexuses and Hondas, they're often skewed in the reliability metrics by the fact that if you are more likely to spend a little bit more on one of those cars, one of those more quality type vehicles, you're also statistically more likely to maintain it properly, to follow the factory recommended maintenance, take it in, pay for proper parts, good oil, all of the high-end replacement parts to be used on your vehicle in order to make it last longer. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if you're somebody who has to be working a lot, you can't take time off of work as frequently, you need your vehicle to get you to and from work and to take your kids back and forth from school, you don't have the luxury of dropping it off at a dealer and driving a different vehicle or having a spouse pick you up, or maybe your dealer is less likely to have loaner cars, and you don't exactly have the money just chilling around to put in full synthetic oil on every oil change and do it religiously every 3,000 miles, the cars are going to be maintained a little bit less regularly and a little bit less well than the cars that are owned by people with more means. So I am confident that if you purchased a Tucson and you maintained it exactly according to the factory recommended maintenance and you took full advantage of that 10-year, 100,000 mile powertrain warranty, you would have just as reliable of a vehicle for those 10 years as the Toyota RAV4. There's very little that's going to go wrong in this car if it's maintained properly. It's a naturally aspirated motor. They've been using it in a lot of different products. They've got fairly simple and straightforward electronics in this vehicle. It's been out for a few model years. This is going to be a car that's going to last you if you treat it well. But again, you're going to be beat down by those statistics if you try to flip it and sell it within a few years. So if you're going to own it for 3 years or less, don't buy the Hyundai. If you're going to own it between 3 years and 15 years, I would say get the Hyundai. And then I also mean maybe 30,000 miles to 150,000 miles. I think this is a great buy at that point because you're going to really ride out the depreciation curve between this and any other competition. So depreciation is not very important to you. It's more important to get a vehicle that costs a little bit less up front. You're probably going to be able to get a great sort of deal, great sort of financing if you need that sort of thing. And you're going to have a worry-free ownership experience for the whole time you take advantage of that warranty. Keep in mind, that 10-year, 100,000 mile warranty doesn't transfer to a second owner. So you can only take advantage of that as the new car buyer for this vehicle. So hey, if you're going to spend new car money and take that depreciation hit, you might as well get the full dollar value out of your warranty, and you could just drive it for 10 years or 100,000 miles knowing that if anything big happens on the car, it's going to be covered by Hyundai's warranty. And then again, if you're maintaining it properly over that whole time period, then you're still going to have a very well working car for as long as you want it to. And then if you plan on driving the car into the absolute ground, if you want to squeeze every little last bit, if you plan on owning the vehicle for 15 to 30 years, then I would go back to buying a Toyota. Because let's be honest, like I said, I am confident that this vehicle will be reliable if you use proper maintenance and put proper parts on it and everything. However, nothing beats those when it comes to reliability. I hate to say it, but Toyota is still the king of reliability super long term. So if you want to purchase a car to absolutely drive it into the ground and put as little money into it as possible, maintain it regularly, yeah, you're probably going to be best off with the RAV4. That car's been out for a while as well. It's built really, really well. You're going to be in good shape. Now, that's not to say that Tucson doesn't have a decent chance of lasting as well. So at that point, I do think it's a little bit more up in the air, 50-50. Buy what you want to buy. If you think the technology is going to last you longer and you're going to be happier for longer in the Tucson, then okay, sure, go with the Tucson. But I do think the sweet spot is right in between that 3-year to 15-year window. If you're going to own a vehicle for that long, this Tucson's a really strong bet compared to a lot of the mid-size competition. And after that, it does sort of just come down to personal preferences, because when you're in the top handful of compact crossovers here, things like this Tucson, the Kia Sportage, the Toyota RAV4, the Honda CR-V, and the Mazda CX-5, and maybe throw the Volkswagen Tiguan in there as well, but I think for the sake of this argument, I'm going to leave it out. Once you get into those type of vehicles, maintained well, they're all going to be good cars to own. They all feature the necessary safety features, and so at that point, it kind of comes down to just what sort of little features do you want? Do you want the heated and cooled seats at a certain price point? Do you want the 360 camera? Do you want the ability to pull the car in and out of garage spots and parking spots with your key? Do you want the 10-year warranty? Do you want a little bit more off-roading capability? Do you even just like the looks of one model versus the other? Do you have a dealership more closely by? Are you affiliated with someone from one of those companies so you can get a little bit better of a deal? Really, it comes down to personal preference at that point. I will say the Tucson offers a lot more space inside than some of those competitors, a little bit more trunk space, more rear seat room, so it's a good buy for that aspect. But on the flip side, it's not as fuel efficient as some of those competitors. We barely squeezed out 31 miles per gallon on our highway fuel economy test. And just driving it around in mixed driving, I mean, this thing's been getting mid-20s, which is really not fantastic. Which brings me to one last point. If you want a new Tucson, I actually recommend getting the hybrid. The hybrid drives better. It's going to get better fuel economy. Maybe not as reliable as the 2.5, but I think you're going to have a better ownership experience during that time. So unless you do a lot of highway driving, if you're driving kind of mixed driving and city driving regularly, do yourself a favor, get the hybrid. But this 2.5 liter is fine, and it's really not, other than the throttle tuning, it's really not any better or worse than a lot of the naturally aspirated competition out there. And we can't forget to rank the Hyundai Tucson on the Daily Motor Car Leaderboard, of which we still haven't come up with a name for. But up at the top, we've got the Hyundai Ioniq 6 so far this year, and then the Prius coming below that, and at the bottom, the Land Rover Range Rover. Where do we put the Hyundai Tucson Limited? It's better than the Range Rover. I'm trying to think of... I think we're probably going in between the S6 and the GLS. I think that's where it's going to go, because I was more impressed by the S6 and the Prius, and the GLS, while it was good as a car, wasn't really that impressive, and I was disappointed in the Range Rover. So there we go. So far, we are fourth out of 6 for the Tucson, but behind some really strong competition: the Ioniq 6, the Prius, the X6, all good cars. All right, well, thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully this was helpful for you. I would certainly recommend going out, giving yourself a test drive in the Tucson if you like the way it looks, if it checks the boxes for you on paper, because this is one of the top 5 compact crossovers, and I would still recommend it. And we'll see you on the next one. I'm Charlie from Daily Motor, and as always, compact crossover on.